Hello and welcome to AIM North America's Unique Device Identification Webinar Series. AIM North America is an alliance enabling the cooperation, development, standardization of AIDC technologies. From barcodes to RFID to IoT, AIM North America is your advocate. Any organization with an interest in data collection is a beneficiary of these efforts. Membership provides an opportunity to influence the direction of the industry, develop policies and standards, access market reports, and engage new partners. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items I would like to go over. First is the AIM antitrust policy. It's the policy of AIM Inc. to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activity shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. Next is our collaboration and work product policy. This states that committee meetings and presentations are held for the primary purpose of advancements in our industry, which necessarily involves development of work product intended solely for the public domain. AIM's developed this policy for the protection of its members who engage in this important collaborative effort. Next are a few more housekeeping notes. You will notice that you are muted. You'll be muted throughout the webinar. If you do have any questions for Ardi, you can send those to me at AIM Member Services through the chat dialog option located at the bottom right of the screen. We'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. Today, I'm here with Ardi Batmanghelidj, who is the president of Innovatum and has served in leadership positions in the software industry for over 30 years. Today, Ardi will be discussing some of the solutions that have been implemented and possible alternative approaches, including augmentation of labeling with additional destination-specific labels. They will analyze infrastructure, AIDC, and system requirements for a destination labeling operation. Ardi, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, good afternoon, and even good evening to some of our friends and colleagues attending from overseas. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedules, and I know most of you are very busy at this point. We will spend about 30 minutes on this presentation. Towards the end, we'll take questions, as Mike suggested. But please do send them to him via the chat. You're here, I think, because you are feeling the pain of fitting a significant number of languages, and 25 plus is pretty much a requirement for EU MDR, but there are certainly additional languages that need to be placed on labels. There are also local economic and regulatory requirements that force a variation in labels. So there's MSRP in India, specific registration numbers and symbols for China and Russia, local distributor contact for Brazil, all of the EU MDR languages, and a vast growing number of requirements. This, for example, is a destination label for products going to Russia, where you have at the top the Russian language requirements for this particular product. You have what's called the ghost symbol, medical device symbol. You have some registration information, etc. So this is what a Russian supplemental label might look like, in addition to the product label that you place on the product at manufacturing time. China and Japan have very strict requirements. Most of the label content has to be in the local language. And in this particular case, this is a GHS label that has all the hazard classifications, etc. And those classifications can be different from US, Europe, China, and other locations as well. So that it has become a significant part of destination labeling, presenting the correct GHS content as well. Turkey has always been an additional challenge for our labeling activities. The destination label in Turkey can be a supplemental label, but more often than not, it is essentially a copy of the finished good, where it needs to have the information in Turkish, it needs to have the batch information, such as the lot number, serial number, expiration date, etc., all available on the label. Symbologies must be on there. The manufacturer's name and address, distributor's name and address need to be present on the label in Turkish as well. So what really happens is, I think we've all acquiesced to the fact that our finished goods labels cannot contain all of the variety. And we need to label based on where the product is going. So we have choices here, and we have customers and colleagues who are doing it in both of these methodologies. One methodology is to have the finished goods label be different based on where the product is likely to go. So what that means is, at the time that you're running through a work order, a finished goods comes out of the manufacturing process and it has to be packaged to go to Russia, Europe, Asia, etc. And to achieve this, often you have to have different SKUs for the same product based on the geography of where it's going. There are UDI assignment challenges. Can you assign the same GTIN to the products going to two different places if you have multiple SKUs? Manufacturing, there has to be planning based on geography. So you can't produce 100 items and put them on the shelf. You have to produce 25 for Europe, 25 for China, 25 for South America, etc. And that really does present significant challenges in terms of rework. If you need to direct some of the European product to South America, and it creates warehousing and logistic challenges. The alternative is to label the finished goods and have it on the shelf with the same exact label, and then at order fulfillment time, being customer orders or redistribution orders, then the same product can go to any of the geographies. So it's the same SKU and the same UDI. There is definitely less complex planning in terms of production planning and demand management. Warehousing becomes less complex because it's the same product sitting on the shelf. There is a downside, there is a challenge that there's increased touches at the distribution center and for distribution purposes. So you have a generic product, but now you have to put a supplemental label or an over label, and that has implications. And to manage all of this, you need more sophisticated systems and infrastructure. What we, excuse me, hang on. What we have discovered with many of our clients is that destination labeling, which means labeling based on where it's going after the fact, seems to be the functionality that is desired out there. And the functionality of a destination labeling system essentially is the ability to design and keep generic destination labeling templates that can be filled with the appropriate translations and content based on where something is going. Included in this is where you have instructions for use, safety data sheets, GHSs, certificates of origin, etc. Any longer documents that need to be attached and associated with the product going to a destination. So these are all language-based. So you need to be able to store these and create a matrix of, for example, a French IFU associated with a particular item going to anywhere that requires the French language. And the system has to have the ability to analyze the destinations and all of the configurations, and then be able to print the product label, supplemental label as needed. The newest boon is the ability of electronic IFUs, and it has been a lifesaver in many ways. So if you have an electronic IFU based on the language, and the destination that you're going to accepts electronic IFUs, then you can dispense with attaching hard copy IFUs or any documents really. You need a very robust location to keep translations by destination. And this piece is really important. You need awareness of the languages that are already on the labels and IFUs and other documents. So just to understand, if I'm already putting the French language on my labels, then if I'm going to a French-speaking country, I don't need to do destination labeling. I don't need to have the supplemental activity. And because there's a cost to doing supplemental labels at destination shipping, it's important to minimize that if we can. The system then, based on knowing where something is going and the language is required in that location, and knowing what is already on the label, can derive the needed and missing languages for that destination. And all of this has to be done very efficiently through scanning barcodes and very fast response time in terms of printing supplemental labels, etc. So the solution is a system that does destination labeling, and here is a medical device label. And essentially you can see here that in this particular label, there are some translations in here, both in the warnings and in the product information. And the system has awareness that these languages are on here. And then when we go to a particular location, we're shipping to a country or a location that requires languages other than these, then it needs to print. One of the key elements that we've identified and have been using with some of our customers is the knowledge of what is on a label. So imagine you have a huge warehouse, let's say in Holland or somewhere in Europe, that has hundreds of thousands of different SKUs on the shelf. And some of these are 10-year shelf life. So something might be there that's 5 or 6 years and it's been sitting on the shelf and somebody orders it. The way that we handle it is by having a database, a historical database for each batch of a product that says, what are the languages on the label? What are the languages on the IFU? Is it an MDD? Is it a medical device directive product, or is it a medical device regulation product, the latest MDR regulations, and EIFU capability? So that is in a vast database of item lot combinations that tells us this information. And keep in mind, over the 5 or 10-year life of a product, you may have done 3 labeling changes and added languages to it over time. So it is important that information be kept at the batch level. There are other ways of doing it based on dates, based on more general entries, but we've found that they're not perhaps as accurate as you would want them to be. So at the destination level, we have to designate what are the documents that need to print. In this example, this is the Russian destination. And because the Russian label requires the ghost symbol and some registration numbers and some other information, then it requires a slightly different destination label. So the template name for the Russian destination label is dest_Russia. And we know that we require IFUs. And for this particular destination, we also require GHS documentation if the product is hazardous. So this is the superset of the kinds of documents that we need to print when something is going to Russia. The second piece of information that we need is to see what this destination requires in terms of languages. In this example, since we're going to Russia, it requires the Russian language, it requires the Romanian language, and if there were others, we could just add them up. There's an unlimited number of languages that can be designated for a particular direction. Here, we can also state whether for this location, electronic IFUs are permitted. And it's really fortunate that most regulatory bodies and most countries are starting to permit electronic IFUs. And with one of our colleagues in Europe, CARAD, we have a list available that gives you all of the locations that accept electronic IFUs, etc. So if you're interested, contact me and I can get you that list. Then we need a very robust dictionary capability. And what we have here is we have a product. This is a product SKU 1401. We have the various languages. So in here, I have 5 lines of languages, 5 lines for the German language, and 5 lines for the French language. So these are the translations, and you know, you can have an approval process for the translations, etc. And the destination label is designed in a very generic manner. So what we have is we have the first language. So in our Russian example, this would be the Russian language, and this would be the Romanian language, and these would disappear through layering, etc., on the template. And you can see that here we have translation line 1, translation line 2, translation line 3, and translation line 4. And these would be concatenated together to form a paragraph of translations. So this, as I said, is completely dynamic. I'm not hard coding that French is in position 1 and Italian is position 2. I'm saying for the destination, language 1 goes in this position and language 2 goes in this position. This is another way of representing the same information. So you can see language 1, and this, in this example, this destination requires German and French, and the assumption is neither German nor French are present on the core label, on the product label. Then destination labeling will go to the dictionary and says they only want translation line 1 and 2 for German. So here it is. From the dictionary, they grab this and they grab this. And the second language is French. They grab line 1 and line 2 from the French translations. So I hope you can see that from a being a dynamic translation capability, this kind of functionality allows you to have very few templates that will handle all of the translations required for the product. So the data interaction for a destination labeling system would look something like this. You have here, you have the definition of the destinations, you have all of the translations, you have product information, etc. So this is what goes into the labels that are generated by the process. Here, you have all of the associated documents. You have the IFUs, the safety data sheets, etc. And you have a database that links these documents to the particular products that they apply to. An IFU for one set of products is linked to those, a different IFU is linked, and there's also languages associated with each of these documents. So it's like a three-dimensional chess where you have relationships between documents, languages, and destinations. And in here, you have your finished goods labeling. So when you do the packaging at the end of a manufacturing order, there is a history of languages on labels that is maintained. Now, we have for several of our customers derived historically from the print history databases and created this batch history information. What then happens is in the customer order fulfillment system, this one says SAP, but it really is immaterial. It could be any ERP system, any order fulfillment system. There is a pick list that is generated. So you have an order for a particular customer going to a destination, and then you have a list of item batch information in that handling unit. So it is also known as a pick header and a pick detail. And then you have a browser-based screen that consumes all of this information and embodies all of the logic that will then allow us to print the labels as needed, the supplemental or over labels as needed, and then also the documentation that is needed to be printed. So the workflow at the distribution center is that you get a manufacturing product coming in, and at that point, we would know what languages are on this product. That goes into stock, and then during the order fulfillment system, the intelligence says, okay, I'm going to Russia. Does this product have Russian on it? If not, then I print a destination label. Or it goes to France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and it says, does the product have the languages necessary for these areas? And if it does, then no further action is necessary. And that's intelligence that resides in the ERP system. The ERP system, when it does a pick list for a particular handling unit, for a particular tote, knows whether all of the products in that tote require destination labeling or not. And it segregates those. So all of the things going to this destination that require additional labeling are placed in one tote, and the ones that don't are placed in other totes. And that then goes to the picking area, and then you have a choice in terms of destination labeling, printing of labels. You can say, system, print the destination labels and IFUs, etc., for all of the products that require destination labeling, and give it to me in one big block of labels. So you hit the print all, and 500 labels come out, and 300 IFUs print out. That methodology then allows you to, or forces you to, take all of that label stuff and go to a work area, and then per box, find the label, find the IFU, and apply it to the particular box, which is then placed into the packing box that then goes out to the customer. I'm not a huge fan of that personally, because I think that has potential for error. One alternative then is to have a scan and print environment where you have a packaging area and you pick up a box from the tote, you scan it, and the labels and the documents for that box print out. You fold them, do whatever you need to do, you apply the label to the box, etc., and then you put it into the packaging box that's going out to the customer. I think the end result is a faster process. It's less error prone, but it does require a dedicated workstation with scanners and the appropriate controls in place to allow you to do that. And here's an example of such a packing area. So I have a workstation up here that is tied to this PC. I have the tote from the pickers that comes into this area, and it sits on here. And over here, I have the box that eventually goes to the customer or to the DC or wherever it's going to for replenishment. Then the box of the product is picked up, it is used, the scanner and then the label prints, and if an IFU needs to print, then it prints at a laser printer that is associated with this workstation. So that essentially is the activity. And there's a screen that looks like this, where you have the picking content, the pick list represented here. The packaging person, the destination labeling operator, scans the handling unit number right into here. This list prints out or is presented on the screen. The first option is to click print all, and that prints everything that is in here, all of the documentation for it. Alternatively, this is where the scanning occurs. And if these are set to automatic print, then with the scanning of, let's say, this particular barcode, so that's the material number and lot number, and it's the GS1 compliant or the HIBIC barcode, then it goes through its business logic and determines that we do need a destination label, and we need 2 IFUs, one in Romanian and one in Russian. So that essentially is the concept of destination labeling in 30 minutes. Mike, back to you.
Thank you, Ardi. Really appreciate the information you provided here. We'll go ahead and get on to the question and answer session. Ardi, if you're ready.
Absolutely.
All right, and there is still some time to chat those questions over to me via the chat dialog box. But we'll start out here with our first question, and that is, why can't we get the same functionality from our ERP?
You can. There is hundreds of thousands of lines of code or intelligence that has been built into a dedicated destination labeling system. If a company is willing to invest in making that level of change to their ERP system, it could be achieved. I always have arguments with folks in terms of buy or build. And more, I think people are going towards buy, because then, you know, there's a vendor behind it. They keep it up. They keep up with the regulations, and internal resources can do things that only internal resources do. But theoretically, building it is absolutely possible.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, what are the limitations on the kinds of printing that can be associated with an item?
There really are none. In terms of the work area that I displayed earlier, you can have multiple labels print out as necessary by the destination and the characteristics of the product. You can also print IFUs and safety data sheets and hazmat documents and certificates of analysis. Whatever the requirement is that is language based, then that can all print with a single scan of the UDI barcode.
Okay, great. And another question we received is, how are all of the linkages managed, and how much work is how much work is done to maintain them?
Yeah, that becomes the matrix that has to be maintained. It's some work, and it really depends on how granular you want to become. You know, we can certainly set up a single destination label template and do the replacement of the data based on destination and the product content. For that, the core requirement is setting up your destinations, defining the documents that need to print, defining the languages for the destination, and then having translations for everything. That's the bare minimum that has to be done. And it really needs to be done regardless of what solution you pick, because that's the business challenge that we've been presented with.
Okay, great. That wraps it up for the question and answer session. If anyone in the audience has additional questions, Ardi has provided his contact information, so you can reach out to him with any questions you may have. Ardi, once again, I just want to thank you for your time and your insights today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining for this presentation. I appreciate your time. Bye-bye.